Miss Cora Lynwood had one hand upon the altar rail and the other locked so tightly around her prayer book that the gilding bit half-moons into her glove, when her stepfather rose from the third pew and declared, before God, Virginia, and every family that mattered along the James, that the bride was a thief. The chapel doors had not yet ceased trembling from the winter wind. Wax guttered in the sconces. Beyond the high windows, snow turned the churchyard pale and severe, as though the world itself had put on a judge's wig. Cora heard a woman, heard the old rector's breath, heard, most sharply of all, the soft of Nathaniel Marchwood's signet ring against the altar rail as his hand closed. Beside her, Marchwood did not move otherwise. Nathaniel Marchwood was a tall, austere man in dark blue wool and velvet, his dark hair tied back without ornament, his face composed with that famous planter's stillness that had made half of Williamsburg call him proud and the other half call him dangerous. He was no nobleman, though men with empty purses bowed to him as if he were a wealthy colonial proprietor, merchant creditor, and tobacco shipping investor whose accounts touched the James River wharves, Williamsburg counting rooms, and Crown supply contracts. This morning he was to become her husband by arrangement, not affection. His ready money for the rebuilding of Lynwood Hall, her dowry lands and colonial timber contracts for his overextended ventures and Virginia holdings. A cold bargain, written in 2 copies, witnessed by lawyers, blessed only because respectability required a blessing. Cora had known there would be no tenderness in it. She had not known there would be blood drawn in public before the vows. Colonel Silas Vale stepped into the aisle with the patience of a man who had rehearsed his wound. He wore mourning black, though Cora's mother had been dead 6 years, and carried under one arm a leather folio tied with green ribbon. His silver hair, his grave mouth, his military bearing, all of it made him appear less accuser than sorrowing magistrate. "Forgive me, Reverend Pembroke," he said, bowing toward the altar. "Forgive me, Mr. Marchwood, but no honest man may stand silent while a fraud is carried to the marriage bed beneath the cover of sacrament. Miss Cora Lynwood has stolen from the Lynwood estate, forged my late wife's hand, and deceived every creditor presently depending upon this union." A stir swept the pews. Cora felt it pass over her like sleet. "That is false," she said. Her voice was clear. She thanked heaven for that. Her knees might have betrayed her. Her voice did not. Vale's eyes softened in public pity. That was always his sharpest weapon. "My dear child, do not worsen it." Marchwood turned his head at last. "Colonel Vale, you will either prove this instant necessity or sit down." Marchwood's tone was low, but it carried. The congregation settled as if under command. Vale untied the green ribbon. "The proof is in accounts discovered last night in Miss Cora's cabinet. Estate funds diverted under assumed names, receipts from printers, physicians, boatmen, and widows, promissory notes drawn against rents not yet collected. Worse," he lifted a folded paper, "a letter in which she confesses that, should Marchwood learn how much money has vanished, he may withdraw and ruin us all." Cora's heart struck once, hard. Not the accounts. Those she could explain, if anyone let her speak long enough. But a confession? She had written no such letter. Vale began to read in a voice bruised with reluctance. "My dear Mrs. Finch, if Mr. Marchwood discovers the sums I have moved through your hands, he will know I am unfit to be his wife. Burn every receipt. There must be no trace linking me to the poor wretches at Carter's Wharf or the wounded rebels at Stony Run." "Enough," Cora said. Not because it was true, because the names were. Mrs. Finch, Carter's Wharf, Stony Run, the poor wretches, the wounded rebels. Faces rose before her. A child with fever in a river fog, a soldier with no boots and a musket wound gone green at the edges, a washerwoman hiding 3 orphan nieces from an overseer's auction. Cora had paid quietly because a woman known to spend estate income on the desperate would be called sentimental, disobedient, unfit to manage property. Because Colonel Vale had forbidden every act of charity not performed in his name. She had hidden mercy as other women hid sin. Vale had found enough to hang her reputation, then forged the rope. "Miss Cora," the rector whispered, stricken. Marchwood looked at her. In his gray eyes she saw no warmth, but neither did she see disgust. He was studying the room, the paper, her stepfather, the way a chess player studied a board after discovering one piece was not where it ought to be. "Did you write that letter?" he asked. "No." "Are the names invented?" Cora lifted her chin. "No." The chapel breathed against her. Vale bowed his head. "You hear her." "They are people," Cora said, louder now, turning from the altar to the pews. "Not wretches, not evidence of theft. People who were hungry, ill, widowed, cheated of wages, or wounded in a war powerful men discuss over Madeira and leave others to bleed for. I sent what I could. I concealed it because Colonel Vale would have stopped it. But I forged nothing. I stole nothing." "Estate funds are not pin money," Vale replied, "nor are rebel sympathies a bridal virtue." That phrase did its work. Rebel sympathies. In a colony split between Crown and Congress, it was more than an insult. It was a legal hazard, a political blade. Marchwood's hand left the rail. "You searched Miss Cora's cabinet on the eve of her wedding?" "As trustee of Lynwood until her marriage, I examined estate papers." "Conveniently." A murmur. Vale's mouth tightened. The chapel doors opened again. Every head turned. A boy of perhaps 12 stood in the entrance, snow on his cap, mud up to his knees, one eye swelling purple. He clutched a packet against his chest. Behind him came Marchwood's valet, Mr. Ames, breathing hard. "Mr. Marchwood," Ames said, "forgive the intrusion. The lad was set upon at the livery yard. He carried a letter addressed to Miss Cora. I thought, given the colonel's accusation—" Vale went very still. Cora saw it. So did Marchwood. Marchwood descended the altar step. "Bring it here." The boy looked first to Cora. There was terror in him, but also stubbornness. "Mistress Finch said no hand but hers, sir. Miss Cora's. They tried to take it. I bit one." A laugh trembled somewhere and died. Cora walked down the aisle herself. Marchwood did not stop her. She knelt before the boy, careless of her wedding silk against the damp floor. "What is your name?" "Tom Bell, my lady." "Tom Bell, you have done bravely." His dirty fingers released the packet into her gloved hands. The seal was cracked but not broken. The direction written in a hand she knew from years of hidden accounts. Mrs. Abigail Finch, seamstress, midwife, keeper of other people's secrets. Cora broke the seal. The first line stole the cold from her body. "My lady, if this reaches you, then Colonel Vale has moved before we could bring the whole of it to Mr. Harbury. Do not marry until you have read what your mother left hidden, and what we have witnessed in your name." There were several pages. A small key fell into Cora's palm, and with it a strip of blue ribbon, faded almost white. Vale said, "Too quickly, a planted thing." Cora rose. Her heart was no longer striking blindly. It had found a rhythm, fierce and terrible. "Then you will not object to its being read." "This is improper." "So is calling a bride thief before the vows." A ripple went through the pews. Marchwood's mouth almost moved. not into a smile, but into acknowledgement. Cora handed him the first page. "Mr. Marchwood, your voice carries better than mine. Read. All of it." For the first time since their betrothal contract had been signed, Marchwood looked surprised. "You trust me to do that?" "No," she said. "I require you to. There is a difference." He accepted the page. And in the church where Colonel Vale had meant to bury her, Nathaniel Marchwood read Mrs. Finch's letter aloud. It told how Cora's small annuities, dress allowances, and legally separate pin money had been routed through Mrs. Finch to feed families at Carter's Wharf after a warehouse fire, to pay Dr. Mercer for treating men from both militias when no hospital would take them, to redeem indenture papers for 2 children falsely extended by a factor in Vale's employ. It named witnesses. It named dates. It enclosed receipts signed not by Cora, but by the recipients, each acknowledging money as a private gift from "a lady who wishes no thanks." Then the letter turned. Mrs. Finch wrote of Mrs. Anne Lynwood, Cora's mother, who before her death had suspected Silas Vale of altering the settlement that preserved Lynwood land for Cora. She had placed copies of deeds, ledgers, and a sworn memorandum in an iron box hidden beneath the old dairy floor, locking it with the small key now in Cora's hand. She had entrusted knowledge of it to Mrs. Finch because the colonel controlled the household and had already dismissed 2 servants who questioned him. The memorandum, Mrs. Finch wrote, would prove that Vale had sold timber rights twice, borrowed against Cora's inheritance, and planned to use her marriage settlement to extinguish debts incurred through speculation and privateering contracts, disguised as loyalist supply accounts. At the final paragraph, Marchwood's voice hardened. "If he accuses you, my lady, do not answer as a frightened daughter. Answer as Mrs. Anne's heir. Mr. Harbury has the duplicate affidavits. Dr. Mercer has the list of men threatened to silence. The boy Tom carries this because no gentleman would think to search a hungry child. God forgive us for needing children to do honest work." Silence followed. Not chapel silence, courtroom silence. Vale smiled. It was small and lethal. A touching romance, produced at the perfect instant by a servant woman dependent upon Miss Cora's purse, and read by a bridegroom who cannot afford scandal. Shall we next accept testimony from every beggar she has bribed? Cora folded the letter carefully. Her hands did not shake now. "No," she said. "We shall accept testimony from Mr. Harbury, Dr. Mercer, the county clerk, and the iron box under the dairy floor. Reverend Pembroke, I ask you to suspend the ceremony." A new shock moved through the room. Marchwood faced her fully. "Miss Cora." "Our contract may wait. My mother has waited 6 years. Vale's eyes flashed. "If this ceremony is suspended, Lynwood's creditors may petition by Monday. Without Mr. Marchwood's funds, the estate collapses. You will ruin your mother's house out of pride." There it was, the cage he had built, polished and called duty. Cora looked at Marchwood. Their bargain lay between them, all ink and ice. "Mr. Marchwood, I release you from any expectation of proceeding today." He regarded her for one long breath. Then he turned to the rector. "The ceremony is suspended until Miss Cora chooses to resume it. My lawyer will remain in Williamsburg. My funds will be held in escrow pending examination of the Lynwood accounts, not withdrawn. Colonel Vale, if any creditor moves before Monday with information received from you, I shall consider it part of the present fraud." Vale gave a soft laugh. "You have no authority over me, Mr. Marchwood." "No," Marchwood said. "Only money, credit, crown-connected leverage, witnesses, and a strong dislike of being made a fool in church. I find they often suffice until law catches up." Cora should have been grateful. Instead, she felt something more bracing: space. He had not rescued her from the room. He had held the door while she walked out. She turned to Tom Bell. "Can you take us to Mrs. Finch?" The boy nodded. "Then we begin there." Mrs. Finch lived behind a milliner's shop near the Market Green, in 2 rooms that smelled of lavender, starch, and boiled herbs. By noon, the snow had become rain. Cora arrived in her wedding gown beneath Marchwood's dark cloak, with Marchwood beside her, Mr. Ames behind them, and half of Williamsburg pretending not to watch from windows. Mrs. Finch opened the door with a pistol in her hand. She was a narrow woman of 50, with clever eyes and a cap pinned so severely it seemed a legal document. When she saw Cora, the pistol lowered by an inch. When she saw Marchwood, it rose again. "He is with me," Cora said. "Many a woman has said that and regretted it. I have not yet had time." Marchwood's brows lifted. Mrs. Finch let them in. Inside, Dr. Mercer stood over a table scattered with papers. He was a broad Quaker with sleeves rolled to the elbow and a scar across his cheek. Beside the hearth sat a black woman Cora recognized as Ruth, whom she had helped flee a violent employer's claim of debt bondage. Beside Ruth, a boy with a crutch. Beside him, a gaunt sailor missing 2 fingers. The room was not a parlor. It was a witness box. Cora stopped just inside the door. "You should not all be here," she said. "Vale will use it against you." Ruth stood. "He already has, my lady. Last night, 2 men came to the Wharf asking who had taken your money and whether we preferred court or jail. Mrs. Finch sent for us before dawn." The sailor spat into the fire. "Court, then. I am tired of being threatened by gentlemen." Marchwood removed his hat slowly, as though entering a church. Mrs. Finch put the pistol on the table. "We have affidavits, some signed, some marked. Mr. Harbury was to file them this morning, but he has not arrived." "Why?" Cora asked. No one answered. A knock came below, 3 sharp raps. Tom, who had been given bread and a blanket, flinched so violently that Cora crossed the room to him. Mr. Ames went to the stair. He returned with a rain-soaked clerk whose wig sat crooked and whose lip was split. "Mr. Harbury's office is locked," the clerk said. "His papers are gone. He was taken at dawn by order of Justice Eddowes on complaint of seditious correspondence." Dr. Mercer swore softly, which, from a Quaker, seemed thunderous. Vale had moved faster than fear. Cora felt the room tilt toward Marchwood. A man like Marchwood would know what to do. A man with his credit could command lawyers, intimidate magistrates, purchase delay. He did speak. "Justice Eddowes dined with Vale last week." "Then we go around him," Cora said. Marchwood looked at her. "To whom?" "To the county clerk for the recorded deeds, to the dairy for my mother's box, to every person here for statements before witnesses Vale does not own." She turned to Mrs. Finch. "How many copies can you make by nightfall?" Mrs. Finch's eyes warmed like a lamp being trimmed. "As many as hands can write." "Then hands shall write. Dr. Mercer, I need your list of patients and who paid you. Ruth, if you are willing, I need the names of the men who threatened you and any who saw them. Mr. Bell," she knelt again before Tom, "you have already done enough, but if you remember their faces—" "One had a scar like a hook," Tom said, "and smelled of cloves." The sailor barked. "Jabez Pike, Vale's runner." Cora stood. "Good, we name him. Mr. Marchwood, can your lawyer draw petitions quickly?" "Yes." "Can he be trusted not to take fright at rebel names?" "He is Scotch," Marchwood said. "He takes fright only at unpaid fees." A laugh broke the room's dread. Brief, necessary. Cora looked down at her wedding dress, rain-stained at the hem, absurd among inkpots and bandages. She tore a strip of lace from one sleeve and tied it around Tom's bruised hand. "Let Colonel Vale call this charity," she said. "By tomorrow, it will be evidence." They went to Lynwood Hall at dusk. The house stood above the river, all red brick and white columns, beautiful from a distance and failing up close. One wing still bore scorch marks from a kitchen fire Vale had blamed on careless servants while pocketing the insurance. Cora had grown up there, under portraits of men who looked as if they had never doubted their right to anything. Her mother's portrait hung in the stair hall, dark-eyed, pearl-throated, one hand resting on a book. Vale waited beneath it. He had changed from morning black to burgundy silk. Two men stood behind him, Jabez Pike with his hook scar, and Mr. Tallow, Vale's attorney, a dry little man with spectacles and a mouth like folded parchment. "My dear Cora," Vale said, "you bring Mr. Marchwood into a family dispute like a constable." "No," she said, "as a witness." Marchwood stood slightly behind her left shoulder. She understood the placement and appreciated it. Near enough to intervene, not near enough to eclipse. Vale's gaze dropped to the key in her hand. "You have been listening to servants' tales." "I have been listening to my mother." His expression changed then, so quickly most would have missed it. Cora did not. 6 years of survival had trained her in the weather of his face. Mr. Tallow cleared his throat. "Miss Cora, as Colonel Vale remains trustee until lawful transfer by marriage, he cannot permit removal of estate property by parties hostile to its interests." "The dairy floor is estate property," Cora replied. "My mother's private papers are not. If you disagree, put your objection in writing and sign your name to it before Mr. Marchwood." Tallow blinked. Marchwood said, "I have paper." No one moved. Cora walked past them. Vale caught her arm. It was not a hard grip, not enough to bruise before witnesses, but every childhood obedience in her body heard it. "Stop. Be sensible. Do not shame us. Do not make me correct you." She looked down at his hand, then up at his face. "Release me. You are overwrought. Release me, or I will ask Ruth Bell, Dr. Mercer, Mr. Ames, and Nathaniel Marchwood to testify that you restrained a legal heir from recovering papers material to a fraud inquiry." His grip tightened for 1 second. Marchwood stepped forward. Cora did not look at him. "I said, release me." Vale let go. In the old dairy, beneath a cracked flagstone near the churn, they found the iron box. Cora knelt with a lantern while Marchwood held back the damp hem of his coat from the mud. The key turned with a... Inside lay oilcloth packets, a small Bible, 2 deeds, a ledger, and a letter addressed in her mother's hand. "To my daughter Cora, when she must know me as more than a mother." Cora did not read that one there. She could not. Not with Vale in the doorway and rain tapping like fingers on the roof. She opened the ledger instead. Mrs. Ann had been meticulous. Page after page showed Lynwood rents, timber sales, tobacco contracts, and then, in a different column, Vale's diversions. Loans taken in Ann's name after her illness began, signatures wavering, then suddenly strong in ways that did not match. Payments to ship captains for cargoes never delivered, a sale of western acreage whose proceeds vanished into a company called March and Crown. Marchwood leaned closer. "March and Crown is one of the ventures offered to me as security in the marriage settlement." "Then he meant to sell you stolen heir," Cora said. From the doorway, Vale. "A dead woman's household notes are not proof." "No," Cora said, lifting the second deed. but the clerk's seal is. Tallow made an involuntary Vale struck him with a look sharp enough to silence. Cora stood with the box in her arms. "You will not touch these." "You imagine law is a nursery tale," Vale said. "You have papers. I have standing. I have creditors who will swear they acted in good faith, magistrates who know rebellion when they see it, and a bridegroom whose crown connections will not protect him if the crown's agents hear he financed colonial sedition through his wife. Think, Cora. Think beyond this little triumph." For a moment, fear entered, not for herself alone, for Ruth, Tom, Dr. Mercer, for Marchwood, whose debts made him vulnerable, for everyone whose names now lived on paper. Marchwood spoke. "You threaten many people for an innocent man." Vale ignored him. His eyes remained on Cora. "Give me the box. Proceed with the marriage. I will settle a generous allowance upon your charities, under supervision. Refuse, and by week's end your beggars will be examined for treason, Harbury transported if I can manage it, and Lynwood sold in parcels." Cora thought of her mother hiding these papers while illness thinned her hands. She thought of Mrs. Finch sending a child through snow because gentlemen searched gentlemen. She thought of the altar and the word thief. "No," she said. It was the smallest word in the room. It held. The legal battle began before breakfast. By dawn, Williamsburg had divided itself into those who believed Miss Cora Lynwood a saint, those who believed her a traitor, and those who found both possibilities entertaining over chocolate. Vale filed first, a petition to preserve estate assets from misappropriation, accompanied by the forged letter and accusations of sedition. Marchwood's lawyer, Mr. Fraser, filed an answer within the hour. Petition for accounting, injunction against disposal of Lynwood property, examination of Colonel Vale's trustee conduct, and immediate release of Mr. Harbury on grounds of malicious complaint. Cora signed her name to the affidavits herself. Mr. Fraser, a red-haired man with ink on his cuffs, hesitated only once. "Miss Cora, this paragraph acknowledges payments to men wounded in action against royal authority." "It acknowledges payments to men with wounds," she said. "If the law requires me to ask a bleeding man which flag he prefers before I send bandages, the law may blush, not I." Marchwood, standing at the window, turned slightly. Mr. Fraser dipped his pen. "Very good." The first hearing took place in the county courthouse, a brick room smelling of wet wool, sealing wax, and ambition. Justice Eddowes presided with 2 associate justices, one sleepy, one alarmed. Vale arrived serene. He had produced creditors like a magician producing doves, men with notes, claims, signatures, all ready to prove Lynwood insolvent unless the marriage funds were immediately placed under trustee management. Cora sat at the front beside Marchwood, but not behind him. When Mr. Tallow suggested she lacked capacity to understand the estate's complexities, she rose before Fraser could answer. "Your worships, may I ask Mr. Tallow 3 questions?" Eddowes frowned. "This is irregular." "So was my accusation in church. Irregularities appear fashionable this week." Someone coughed to hide a laugh. Marchwood looked down at his gloves. Eddowes allowed it, perhaps because refusing would look too much like fear. Cora faced Tallow. "Did Colonel Vale instruct you to prepare the revised marriage settlement naming March and Crown securities?" Tallow adjusted his spectacles. "I prepared documents under direction, yes." "Did you verify that March and Crown possessed the assets represented?" "That was not my duty." "Did you know my mother's original settlement forbade substitution of speculative ventures for land without my written consent after my 21st year?" Tallow's mouth worked. "I had not seen..." Cora held up the deed from the iron box. Would you like to see it now? The sleepy justice woke. Vale's serenity thinned. By afternoon, Mr. Harbury was released, pale but unbroken, and testified that he had received from Mrs. Anne Lynwood a duplicate memorandum years earlier, sealed until Cora came of age. He had delayed acting because Vale, as trustee, supplied accounts that appeared proper. Only Mrs. Finch's recent receipts revealed discrepancies. Dr. Mercer testified next. Ruth testified after him, standing straight, though Pike glared from the back wall. Tom Bell was spared the stand. Cora insisted his bruised face and Mrs. Finch's oath were enough for the day. Then Vale called his witnesses. They were polished men, creditors, factors, a captain with gold lace on his hat. Each spoke of Colonel Vale's honor, Miss Cora's secrecy, dangerous politics, missing funds. One produced a receipt bearing Cora's initials authorizing payment for gunpowder. Cora had never seen it. Marchwood's face darkened. "Fraser, wait," Cora whispered. She asked to see the receipt. The initials were good, too good. Her C had an old habit learned in childhood. When hurried, she closed the top loop. This one was elegant, open, practiced from a model. "Mrs. Finch," Cora said, "may I borrow your needle?" The court stared. Mrs. Finch, sitting behind her, produced one without question. Cora pricked her finger and touched one drop of blood to the receipt's corner. Eddowes lurched upright. "Miss Cora!" "Iron gall ink darkens with time," she said. "This ink was laid recently and dried over heat. See how it smears under damp? My mother's steward taught me accounts before Colonel Vale dismissed him. A 6-month-old receipt would not weep like that." Mr. Harbury bent over it. Fraser followed. Even the sleepy justice came down from the bench. The captain shifted toward the door. Marchwood moved first, not to seize him, but to stand in the way. "Going somewhere?" Marchwood asked. The captain sat. It was not victory, not yet. Law moved like a cart through mud. But by evening, Eddowes could no longer pretend the matter was a daughter's extravagance. He ordered the Lynwood accounts impounded, March and Crown books produced, and Jabez Pike held for questioning after Ruth identified him as one of the men who threatened the Wharf families. Vale bowed to the bench with exquisite control. As he passed Cora, he murmured, "You have no idea what you have invited." She answered, equally soft, "Witnesses." That night, Cora found Marchwood in the garden of the Raleigh Tavern, beneath a bare arbor silvered with frost. Music and argument leaked from the rooms behind them. Williamsburg was celebrating, condemning, wagering. She wanted only air. He held out a cup of coffee. "Mrs. Finch said you had eaten nothing since dawn." She made this sound like a hanging offense. Cora accepted it. Mrs. Finch has a broad gallows. They stood side by side, not touching. "You did well today," he said. "I was frightened." "That is not contrary to doing well." She looked at him then. In the lantern light, his severity seemed less like coldness than discipline learned at cost. "At the altar, why did you not withdraw? Any prudent man would have." "I am not often accused of prudence. Your creditors would disagree." A shadow of amusement. "My creditors accuse me of many things, mostly in writing." The warmth between them surprised her because it was small and because it survived the day. He looked toward the dark street. "I intercepted a letter once before, not yours, my father's. It proved my elder brother had been cut from an entail unfairly. I was 17. I gave it to my mother, who burned it." She said families survive by knowing what not to read aloud. His jaw tightened. My brother died owing money to men who would have been his tenants if justice had been done. I have disliked hidden papers ever since. Cora held the coffee in both hands. Is that why you helped me? Partly. And the other part? He was silent long enough that she expected retreat. At the altar, he said, when Vale offered you the easiest path, marry, be quiet, let me solve the scandal. You refused me as neatly as you refused him. I have spent years among people who mistake protection for possession. You did not. I admired it. Cora's throat tightened. Admiration was not tenderness. It was steadier, perhaps rarer. Our marriage was meant to be a ledger, she said. Yes. Ledgers can be corrected. He looked at her. The air between them changed. They can, he said. Behind them, the tavern door opened, and Fraser called for Marchwood. More papers, more motions, more mud. Marchwood did not move at once. Miss Cora, tomorrow, she said, because if he spoke gently now, she might forget the war was not won. Tell me tomorrow. He bowed. Tomorrow, then. Tomorrow brought danger. At Carter's Wharf, Cora went to thank the families whose affidavits had endangered them. Marchwood insisted on accompanying her. She allowed it, along with Ames and two sober men from Fraser's office. Fog lay heavy over the river. Warehouses loomed like hulks. Ruth led them through alleys to a shed where children mended nets beside a brazier. There, Cora met the lives her hidden money had touched, not as entries in Mrs. Finch's hand, but as breath and bone. Mrs. Bell, Tom's mother, pressed Cora's hands and wept because the doctor paid from Cora's purse had saved her youngest from fever. An old cooper showed the redeemed indenture papers of his grandsons. The one-legged boy with the crutch, Samuel, demonstrated how Dr. Mercer had fitted the hinge Marchwood now examined with grave interest. A young widow named Eliza brought out a quilt Cora had unknowingly paid her to finish, every square stitched from scraps of burned warehouse cloth. I thought, Cora said, I thought I was sending too little. Ruth shook her head. You were sending proof that someone saw us. That is never little. The words struck deeper than praise. Then smoke thickened. Not brazier smoke, warehouse smoke. A cry rose outside. Men ran past the shed. Flames licked from the lower windows of Harraby's storehouse, the very building where several Wharf witnesses had kept tools and papers after Vale's threats. Pike! The sailor shouted. Chaos broke. Children screamed. Cora saw, through the fog, Jabez Pike near the alley mouth with a torch stump in his hand. He saw her too. Marchwood moved toward him, but Cora caught his sleeve. The children first. For one fraction, violence warred with obedience in him. Then he turned and lifted Samuel bodily, carrying him through smoke while Cora and Ruth drove the smaller children toward the river steps. Burning pitch fell from an awning. Cora's eyes streamed. Someone shoved her. She fell hard, palms scraping ice and oyster shell. Pike loomed over her. Colonel says you should have taken his bargain, he hissed. Cora kicked him in the knee with all the force fear could lend. He cursed and staggered. She seized a fallen boat hook and swung upward, catching his wrist. The torch stump fell into the mud. Then Marchwood was there, smoke blackened, terrible. He did not strike Pike. He pinned him against the warehouse wall with one forearm until Ames and the sailor bound his hands. Alive, Cora gasped. He testifies alive. Marchwood's eyes met hers through the smoke. He nodded once. Pike did testify, after 12 hours in custody and the discovery of Vale's purse in his coat. Not nobly, not fully, but enough. He admitted he had been ordered to frighten witnesses and retrieve papers. He claimed the fire was his own idea. No one believed him, but law required steps, and Cora had learned to take each one and force it to bear weight. The final hearing convened 3 days later before a larger panel, with Eddowes suddenly ill and replaced by a judge from York County who had not dined with Vale. March and Crown's books, produced under order, revealed the scheme. Vale had pledged Lynwood timber to 3 creditors, inflated debts, forged Anne's endorsement after her illness, and intended Marchwood's marriage payment to settle the most dangerous claims while leaving Cora dependent and silent. When Vale took the stand, he remained magnificent. "I preserved that estate," he said. "I made harsh choices women and dreamers cannot comprehend. Miss Cora would have given Lynwood away in spoonfuls to every beggar with a sad tale. I secured a colonial proprietor. I secured capital. I secured her future." Cora rose for the last time. Fraser whispered, "Careful." She stepped into the open space before the bench. "Colonel Vale, did you love my mother?" The question unsettled him more than accusation. "This is sentimental nonsense." "Did you?" "I honored her." "You forged her name." "I acted under necessity." "You locked her papers away from her daughter." "To prevent confusion." "You called me thief with a forged letter in the house of God." His eyes glittered. "Because you are a thief of order. You steal obedience from servants, gratitude from dependents, authority from men appointed to hold it." There, his mask slipped, and everyone saw the face beneath. Not guardian, not patriot, not grieving widower, but a man enraged that power might require consent. Cora let the silence widen. Then she took from her reticule her mother's sealed letter. She had read it only that morning, alone. Her eyes were dry now because the tears had done their private work. "My mother wrote that she feared not poverty nor scandal, but that I might mistake endurance for virtue. She wrote, 'If Silas teaches you to survive by silence, let my last command be that you disappoint him.'" She faced the judges. "I am done surviving him. I ask the court to remove Colonel Vale from all trusteeship, refer the forgeries and assaults for prosecution, release the Lynwood estate from fraudulent securities, and recognize my right to administer my separate property and charitable gifts without his interference. If debts lawfully exist, I will pay them lawfully. I will not purchase peace with lies." No one breathed. The judge from York County conferred with the panel. Law took its time even when truth stood waiting in the room. At last he pronounced orders. Vale removed as trustee, accounts seized, suspected forgeries referred to the Attorney General, Pike held, Harbury cleared, the marriage settlement suspended pending lawful revision. Miss Cora Lynwood recognized as principal heir with authority to appoint auditors. It was not a hanging. It was not a thunderbolt. It was something better. The machinery Vale had used against others turning, cog by cog, toward him. Vale was escorted out without chains, because gentlemen often received the courtesy they had denied. At the door he looked back at Cora. "You will regret making enemies of men like me." Cora stood beside Ruth, Mrs. Finch, Dr. Mercer, Harbury, and the boy Tom Bell, whose bruised eye had gone yellow at the edges. "No," she said. "I regret only taking so long." The wedding took place 2 weeks later in the same chapel, with fewer flowers and more witnesses. Cora wore not the grand silk gown, which still smelled faintly of smoke, but a cream wool dress embroidered at the cuffs by Mrs. Finch. Ruth sat in the second pew. Tom Bell carried the ring with solemn ferocity. Dr. Mercer stood near the door in case anyone fainted from virtue or politics. Fraser had rewritten the settlement until it resembled not a trap, but a partnership. Marchwood's funds invested transparently in Lynwood repairs and shipping, Cora's separate property secured, charitable disbursements acknowledged as hers to make, estate accounts audited quarterly by men and women she chose. Before the vows, Cora and Marchwood stood again at the altar rail. The rector, nervous from memory, looked once toward the pew where Vale had stood. It was empty. Marchwood leaned slightly toward Cora. If any man rises today, Ames has instructions to sit on him. Cora nearly laughed aloud in church. When the rector asked if anyone knew cause why they should not be joined, silence answered. Not the frightened silence of the first day, a chosen one. Marchwood spoke his vows steadily. Cora spoke hers with equal steadiness. Obey had been removed after a conversation in which the rector discovered that Miss Cora Lynwood could discuss theology, law, and grammar for longer than his nerves could endure. In its place, they promised counsel, fidelity, and honest dealing. Outside, bells rang over thawing streets. At the chapel steps, with rice in her hair and winter sun on his face, Marchwood took her hand. "Now," he said quietly, "may I tell you tomorrow's sentence?" Cora smiled. "You are late." "I know." He looked, for once, almost young. "Cora, I entered this arrangement needing your land, your contracts, and the appearance of stability. I thought affection a luxury, best left to people with cleaner accounts. Then you stood in a church and demanded truth when silence would have been profitable. You turned charity into testimony and fear into law. I do not merely admire you, I love you. Inconveniently, thoroughly, and with no clause for withdrawal." The world narrowed to his hand around hers. She had thought love would arrive as rescue when she was a girl, then dismissed it as a story told to keep women patient. This was neither rescue nor patience. It was recognition. "I love you too," she said. "But I warn you, Mr. Marchwood, I intend to be troublesome." His thumb moved over her glove. I had begun to hope so. Spring came late that year, but it came. Lynwood Hall lost some acreage to honest debts and gained something rarer, clean books. The burned wing was repaired first, not for balls, but for a schoolroom and infirmary funded openly by Mrs. Marchwood, as Cora became after vows were spoken and lawyers exhausted themselves confirming what the chapel had already understood. Marchwood settled what could be settled, sold what pride alone had kept, and chose Virginia not as refuge, but as ground where a different household might be built. Vale's prosecution moved slowly. Men with friends do not fall fast. Yet he did fall, first from trusteeship, then from credit, then from polite invitations, which wounded him most. Pike's testimony, March and Crown's ledgers, Mrs. Ann's memorandum, and 3 forged notes bearing impossible dates brought indictment. Whether prison or disgrace claimed him longer mattered less to Cora than the fact that he no longer held keys. She kept one key on a chain at her throat, the small iron key from Mrs. Finch's letter, not as ornament, as reminder. Years later, when the war had changed flags and names and neighbors into legends or ghosts, children ran through Lynwood's repaired halls. Some were hers and Marchwood's, Anne, solemn and bookish, Edward, who asked illegal questions of every tutor, little Mercy, born during a thunderstorm and convinced thunder belonged to her. Others came daily from the wharf, the farms, the road, children whose mothers needed medicine, whose fathers had not returned, whose futures depended upon someone reading accounts honestly. On autumn evenings, Cora sometimes found Marchwood in the schoolroom doorway, watching her teach figures on a slate. "You look," she told him once, "as though you were auditing me." I am admiring the solvency of the Republic, he said. This is long division. All republics begin somewhere. She laughed then, and the children looked up because Mrs. Marchwood's laughter had become one of the household's ordinary sounds. Later, after lamps were lit and the younger children slept, Cora and Marchwood walked to the old dairy. It had been cleaned, whitewashed, and turned into a records room. Ledgers lined the shelves. Receipts were copied, sealed, witnessed. No mercy in that house needed to hide in drawers again. Cora stood where she had knelt in mud with her mother's key. Marchwood came beside her, their shoulders touching. "Do you ever wish," he asked, "that the first wedding had been quiet?" She considered it. Outside, Anne was scolding Edward for teaching Mercy to say injunction. From the river came the bell of a boat arriving at the wharf. Somewhere in the kitchen, Mrs. Finch, who had never quite left, was terrorizing a maid into resting her sprained ankle. "No," Cora said, "quiet is not the same as peace." He took her hand, no longer cautiously, no longer as part of any bargain. In the records room of the house she had reclaimed, amid ledgers corrected and letters finally read aloud, Cora leaned into the life they had made from scandal, law, smoke, and stubborn hope. The fires had been quiet once, hidden in hearths, in sealed boxes, in women who learned to lower their voices. Now they burned in lamps across Lynwood Hall, steady enough for children to read by, bright enough for any man at the door to know this house belonged to those who would speak.